What's good, family? Just a quick heads up for you. I started recording this episode before the Ryan Ramczyk news broke, but it broke during the episode. So you are going to get initial reactions to that. And I mean, immediate reactions to it. But also, we're starting off the episode talking about gap and zone blocking, as well as actually projecting the offensive line in 2021. So it's all nothing but good timing on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another midweek fundamentals episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints, here as a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On today's episode, we're going to be breaking down the differences between gap or man blocking schemes as well as zone blocking schemes and show you which one the New Orleans Saints love to utilize and why Alvin Kamara is just so dang good at it. Then we're going to take a look at the Saints offensive line as we continue our position by position preview ahead of the 2021 NFL season. As always, I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, co-managing editor over at CanalStreetChronicles.com, and your Tuesday co-host over at the National Locked On NFL podcast. We got all that and a little bit of lanyap for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints, your team every day. All right, family, before we get started with today's midweek fundamentals, I want to remind you about the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast hosted by Vinny Iyer of Sporting News. Fantastic show, getting you caught up on everything that you need to know about fantasy football and making sure that you can dominate your fantasy league with Locked On Fantasy Podcast. So go and check him out over at Locked On Fantasy Football, wherever you get your podcast. All right, so we want to talk a little bit about gap blocking schemes versus zone blocking schemes. Just to be very, very clear here, there's a big difference between the two, but you're also going to hear some other sort of phrases too, right? Gap blocking, man blocking, power blocking, all kind of the same thing, but you can kind of lump all of them together into gap blocking versus zone blocking. So the big two principles to understand as the difference between these two is that gap blocking is all about taking out the defender on either side of a play to create a gap. That makes sense? You're looking at offensive linemen that need to create a gap on their left side, so they're blocking the guy to their right side so that they get their back between or to the gap, allowing them to make sure that they have their body in between the defender and where the running back is supposed to be going. So we'll talk a little bit more in detail about that. But also over on the zone side, the big difference between the two there is that instead of really being concerned about blocking a defender, offensive linemen are blocking an area. They're blocking a gap. Remember, you have the A gap, B gap, C gap, all of that. They're worried about a path, and anybody that gets in their way in that path gets the block. They get the hands. So that's the big difference between the two from a very basic standpoint, but we could talk a little bit more, let's say with more context here. So let's talk a little bit more about man blocking. Like I mentioned, if you want to create that gap that's over on the left side, let's say between the guard and the tackle, you're basically going to see the offensive line split and then get their backs to where the gap is supposed to be. Again, if their back is where the gap is, then that means that their body is in between the defender and the hole that the running back is trying to get to. Now, it takes a little bit of patience by the running back to make sure that that hole develops, and then it takes some vision to where if it doesn't develop because maybe a second level guy gets down or even a safety gets down and plugs that gap, then they'll need to know whether to bounce or to bend or get outside in whatever way that they can to try to extend the play. So there's vision, and there's a whole part of this that comes down to the running back, even in this gap blocking or man blocking scheme, or you just try to meet that safety head on and say, all right, playing a game of chicken here, whoever wins, wins, and then be able to maybe power through and then pick up some extra yardage or get the 2 yards that you need. The idea of the sort of gap blocking scheme is just to be able to create that space, and if you can, move and reset the line of scrimmage, which is really a fact in all running games, regardless of what scheme you're using. Because if you can reset the line of scrimmage, then that allows the running back all of that additional opportunity to be able to gather yardage before contact. But that's the basic idea when it comes to man blocking. You're looking for, or gap blocking, you're looking to block a defender, a person that you are assigned to block based upon wherever you're trying to open up that gap. With the zone blocking scheme, you're going to need a little bit more of a, let's say, visual reference. So if you have a Game Pass subscription, I highly recommend, especially if you're listening over on the podcast side, jumping to Alvin Kamara's 40-yard run, the first touchdown that he had against the Minnesota Vikings. In case any Vikings fans happen to be listening, just a quick reminder, Alvin Kamara had 6 rushing touchdowns in that game. 6 of them things. So just a reminder for you there. But if you pull that up, then you'll be able to sort of follow along here. Over on the YouTube side, we're going to the dots. And actually, I'm going to switch up the display here a little bit to make this a little bit clearer for you. But we're going to go to the dots. We're going to go to Next Gen Stats, their tweet that's out there that really breaks down this play. We get to use the bubbles, hashtag the dots. That's how we be rolling over here. So basically, this is a zone blocking scheme. This is what you're going to see. So remember that all of this happens, by the way, within about 3 seconds, what we're going to break down. So it's a lot to take in. So the fact of the matter here is that what you're trying to do is create this lane in between the guard and the tackle. In this instance, it's James Hurst, number 74, and Terron Armstead, number 72. But the thing is that that's all going to move, right? Everybody's going to move to the left, because the first thing that you see when it comes to a gap blocking scheme is the offensive line pushing forward so that they can get to their defender and block down for them. When it comes to the zone blocking scheme, you see what's called a read step, to where the entire offensive line moves in unison to one side or the other. The side that they move to is the play side. That's where the play is designed to go, where the run is designed to go. So you'll see play side, and then you'll see backside blocks as well. So you're going to see that in this situation. I'm just going to scrub through this really slowly, because you're going to see that entire offensive line move to their left as soon as that ball is snapped. Everybody moving in unison, right? So now as the handoff is taking place, you also have a backside blocker. This is Marquez Callaway that's coming across the backside to grab anybody that's unblocked. But because Ryan Ramczyk is an absolute just man on these streets, he actually ends up taking care of 2 blocks out here for this one. So remember where this gap originally was, right? It was in between James Hurst and Terron Armstead, the guard and the tackle on the left side. By the time this play is done developing, the hole actually opens up between Cesar Ruiz and Ryan Ramczyk on the right, like in between the right guard and right tackle. That's how much the zone blocking scheme really has an impact, because you're seeing Erik McCoy get up to the second level up here to grab a linebacker. You're seeing Jared Cook get up to the second level to grab a linebacker. And then you have your backside blocks over on the non-play side as well, just in case Alvin Kamara ends up making another read, because he's got 3 reads here before he breaks through the line of scrimmage. He can bang, which is taking the ball right up the middle. He can bounce and go around the blockers, or he can bend and come back to the opposite side and then take on the backside blocks over on this side. So he has 3 options here. But the thing that's so incredible about all this is that from snap to the point that Alvin Kamara is breaking the line of scrimmage here, it has been 2 seconds, 3 seconds. So that's how quickly he has to make these reads. And then he just ends up winning this all the way to the end zone up against the Minnesota Vikings in that game. So that is your basic breakdown right there. That's how the Saints utilize it. That's an instance in which the Saints utilize an inside zone run, to where the play design was to go inside, but there's also outside zone runs that are designed to take you to the outside. Alvin Kamara and the New Orleans Saints love those as well. But you have your 3 options: your bend, your bang, your bounce, and then you have your 2 options as well when it comes to the blocking schemes themselves, gap and zone blocking. And you're going to continue to see the Saints rely on zone blocking. They have an extremely athletic offensive line, and they have an extremely athletic, smart, and really, really good linebacker running back that's able to see all of this develop in front of him and make the right choice. So there you go. That's the big difference between gap blocking or man blocking and zone blocking schemes, and how the Saints utilize them. Now, we're going to be talking about who's going to be running that scheme in 2021. We're going to look back first, talk about who the Saints lost, who they gained, and who's returning on the offensive line. Then we'll take a look at projecting who that 2021 offensive line might be, all the way down to the bottom of the depth chart, or the bottom of that positional depth chart there. So we'll look at all the different possibilities as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. You got a lot of developments in the NBA right now, so if you want to get in on any of that action, you've got the Phoenix Suns and the LA Clippers tonight. Can the Suns finally close it out and advance their first finals since Charles Barkley was on the team. Right now, they are I can take a look at it here. They are actually a +1 underdog to Los Angeles Clippers in Los Angeles tonight. If you want to get in on that action as well as everything else that you've got going on, you've got trade props. Where's Ben Simmons' next team going to be? Will he be a 76er? Will he not be a 76er? And so much more that you could take a look at, including the NBA draft right around the corner as well, all over at betonline.ag. So go and check them out. Sign up for your free account today. And when you put down the money that you can use to bet on, don't forget to use the promo code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, so you can get a 50% welcome bonus on top of your first deposit. So if you put down $200, you get an extra $100. You walk away with $300 that you can start betting with right away. So go and check it out. It's the promo code locked on for that 50% welcome bonus over at betonline.ag. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. All right, Who Dat Nation, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints for Midweek Fundamentals. This week, we broke down gap blocking versus zone blocking, took a really early look at it. We'll continue to take a look at offensive line and everything all throughout the offseason and more fundamentals to get you caught up on verbiage, vocabulary, everything you need to better understand the game of football, which is one of my favorite parts of being able to do this show. But now we want to take a look at the position by position review that we're doing, because I also like to make sure that everybody's edified. Everybody knows all the names on the New Orleans Saints roster before the 2021 training camp portion of the offseason begins. So let's jump now to the offensive line. In case you've missed it, we've already broken down quarterback, running back, tight end, and wide receiver. Earlier episodes from this week, as well as some episodes from last week, if you want to go back and watch and or listen to those on your favorite podcast provider, or of course over on YouTube as well. Shout out, what's going on, world? So let's go ahead and jump into the offensive line here. We'll start off with the losses for the New Orleans Saints going into the 2021 season. So 2 players that the New Orleans Saints are losing on the offensive line, one of which has been a key player for the Saints since Max Unger retired. Remember, Max Unger retired a couple years ago, and then a day later, they signed Nick Easton and brought Nick Easton in. Of course, the Saints had a heads up about Max Unger. They knew that it was coming, so they had already had this sort of in place. But Nick Easton now no longer with the New Orleans Saints. There were some whispers that he might be retiring after dealing with some concussion injuries over the course of his time, particularly here recently. But as of right now, no official word on that. But there had also been rumors that the New Orleans Saints would be interested in reuniting with the offensive lineman as well. So we'll see how that works out. But Nick Easton has played just about every position for the New Orleans Saints, including the 6th offensive line, center, guard, and he's also played a little bit at tackle at points during his career as well. The other offensive lineman that the Saints don't have returning next year is Cameron Tom. Cameron Tom only took 3 snaps last year. He has been somebody that has been a big part of the Saints' plan. It's always felt like in the offseason, but never really was able to stay healthy long enough during the offseason to really pan out and get opportunities during the regular season. You think about the opportunity that's opened up at the center position that Cameron Tom just unfortunately was never able to really be around to take advantage of. And now Erik McCoy is there, and the Saints look like they have a 10, let's just say double-digit year starter at the position now moving forward. But Cameron Tom no longer on the team. Now, as for the players that are being added, you've got some interesting names here. Let's start with the undrafted free agent that the Saints brought in post-draft. That would be Mike Brown out of West Virginia. No sacks allowed in the 10 games that he played in 2020. And he also had 12 knockdowns, 6'3", 340 pounds, a little bit heavier than the Saints usually like to go on the offensive line. So it'd be interesting to see maybe where he fits in. But again, if he fits into that zone blocking scheme, then he has an opportunity here in camp to be able to show that he at least deserves maybe a practice squad spot if he can land that. Then you look at, let's look at a couple of the veterans that they're bringing in. And it's a short-term veteran, right? It's a young veteran in Christian Montano, who actually is a Tulane alum, 6'4", 300 pounds, spent actually 5 years with Brown, and then a 6th year with his graduate transfer year at Tulane, became a part of the offensive line that led the way for a school record in rushing yards in Tulane. A little bit older, coming into the NFL as an undrafted free agent last year with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now he ends up in New Orleans. He was just like Jalen McCleskey, got to essentially be one of those local guys that performed at the pro day for Tulane, and then the Saints ended up bringing him in. Now, here was an interesting addition that not enough people, I think, are talking about. It's Kyle Murphy, a 4-year offensive lineman. He's been in the NFL for a while. He tried out with the New Orleans Saints at minicamp and then ended up getting signed at the same time that they also brought in Ohio linebacker Quentin Pauling, and then they also signed Sutton Smith, the former Northern Illinois, if I remember correctly, linebacker that's transitioning over to fullback, and we'll have a little bit of a fullback competition between him and Alex Arma. He played and had starts with the Green Bay Packers, Kyle Murphy did both at right guard and at left tackle, so he showed you some versatility. And even on the New Orleans Saints bio for Kyle Murphy, it specifically notes that he's a very versatile player and that his versatility and flexibility will sort of help him out as it gets to the offseason portion of training camp halfway through the offseason. So really interesting to see that highlighted in his bio on the team's very own website. So we'll circle back to him, but Landon Young is the guy that they invested a draft pick in. He was drafted in the 6th round of the 2021 draft, this past draft. 6'6", 6'7", 321 pounds, 5'1", 40-yard dash, which is great for his size. 34 bench reps, extremely strong. He was part of that big blue wall in Kentucky that was considered the SEC's best offensive line for a long time, and oftentimes considered one of college football's best offensive line. In fact, they won that award multiple times during Landon Young's time with Kentucky. So there's a lot of really interesting potential here with the new guys that are coming in. Kyle Murphy is somebody that, again, like I mentioned, not a lot of folks are talking about because, again, he was, drafted late by Green Bay and then didn't really get a lot of opportunity over that time, dealt with some season-ending injuries, was sent to injured reserve a couple of times throughout his 4 years. But, you're not looking for him to be a starter, right? You're looking for him to potentially plug in some gaps. We'll talk about those gaps in just a little bit. But let's talk about the players that are returning but didn't get snaps last year. Actually, there's only one of those players, and that's Calvin Throckmorton. So Calvin Throckmorton's coming back after being on the practice squad last year. He's somebody that I was very, very interested in last year's draft. Ended up signing as a UDFA last year. He's played every single position on the offensive line when it came to his time in Oregon. He isn't the fastest, but he's agile. He moves really well in space and really like in tight spaces, and can play tackle, can play guard. That versatility, of course, being something that would help him with the New Orleans Saints quite a bit. So he might actually end up now, after a year on the practice squad, getting more opportunity with the team. And then just to wrap this up before we actually take a look at what the depth chart could look like in the next segment, your players that are coming back, of course, your starting 5. I think we can give that away. That's pretty simple, right? Terron Armstead, Andrus Peat, Erik McCoy, just going from left to right. And then you've got Cesar Ruiz, who's going to be at right guard, and then at right tackle, of course, Ryan Ramczyk. But then also returning, you've got James Hurst, Will Clapp, Ethan Greenidge, and Derek Kelly. Will Clapp, Ethan Greenidge, Derek Kelly all played less than 60 snaps last year. James Hurst played 357. That's an important number. I'll tell you why, because it helps you understand what the New Orleans Saints 2021 unit will look like from 1 through 5 and beyond as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. The New Orleans Saints do a great job always making sure that they have the extra parts and pieces that they need for their offensive line, as we're discussing today. But maybe you might be a little bit behind on the parts and pieces that you need for your vehicle. No worries. I know you're having probably some trouble over at not the corner store. Don't go to corner store for your parts, but you might go to the place around the corner for some parts that you're looking for. And maybe they don't have exactly what you need, or they're trying to upsell you on something else, and you feel like you're paying more than somebody else that's buying it for a shop. And the fact of the matter is that you're paying a lot more. And that's why rockauto.com should be a part of what you always go and check out whenever you need a part, piece, or accessory for your vehicle. Same prices paid by professionals and do-it-yourselfers, and most of the time you're talking about stuff that is cheaper than the store around the corner, those chain stores that you might go and check out and spend an hour in because they need to go and check the back for a part that they don't have, and they have to order it for you anyway. Don't worry about it. Just order it yourself from the comfort of your own home. Just give them the make, your model, your whatever the vehicle is, and the year, and let them know what parts you're looking for. And you're going to get several options at 30, 50, sometimes 70% the price of what you might pay over at some of these other spots. So go and check them out, rockauto.com. Don't forget to let them know that Locked On sent you. Amazing selections, reliably low prices, and all the parts your car will ever need at rockauto.com. And of course, and as always, as you're trying to stay prepared and work your way through the rest of your day, whether you're gap blocking or zone blocking, you need that energy, and you can get it with a good protein bar that you can actually enjoy. You know what I'm talking about. Built bars, the protein bars that taste like a candy bar, the most deliciousest candy bar. You see, I even called it a candy bar. The most deliciousest protein bar ever created. I might use that for my thumbnail right there. But absolutely the best protein bars that are out there. 9 amazing and incredible flavors with rotating limited edition flavors on the website all the time, all covered in 100% chocolate, but you're talking about 17, 18 grams of protein, but only 4 or 5 grams of sugar. And you're looking at low carbs, low fat, everything that you need to be taking care of yourself, you can get with these protein bars. You get yourself a box of one flavor. You can get yourself a box of 3 flavors that you customize, or you can get a sample box so you can get a taste of everything that they have to offer. Go and check them out at builtbar.com. And don't forget to use the promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15, for 15% off of your next order, whether it's your first or you're a returning customer. LOCKED15 for 15% off at builtbar.com. Oh, y'all, I love it. I love when this happens. Big shout out to Ian Rappaport for the tweet. You can't see that on the screen, but that's all right. I get to talk about this right away, and this goes right into the predictions for what the New Orleans Saints starting offensive line will look like going into 2021. From Ian Rappaport, the tweet that just came out, the New Orleans Saints and all-pro left tackle Ryan Ramczyk have agreed to terms on a massive new extension, sources say, locking him up for the foreseeable future. Let me see if there are any other details that are out at the moment. Yes, he's signing a 5-year, $90 million extension with a $60 million guarantee. Makes him the highest paid right tackle in the NFL. That's per Adam Schefter. But this is big. $90 million extension. Ryan Ramczyk now is under contract with the New Orleans Saints for the next 6 seasons through the 2026 season. Hallelujah. We are out here. I absolutely love it. This is fantastic. So, New Orleans Saints locking up Ryan Ramczyk, one of the most important pieces to the success of their team for the foreseeable future. We will be breaking down this contract and everything as we get more details in tomorrow's episode. But there's the news. Here we are. We got it. This is absolutely fantastic for the New Orleans Saints. And of course, for New Orleans Saints fans who want to make sure that this offensive line is still intact for the foreseeable future, because you're going through a major shift at the quarterback position. And because of that, if you can keep that offensive line right, then you end up protecting and giving your quarterback time as they learn their new system, as they come into a new scheme with this team, and allow them to continue to be successful as a unit on the offensive side. No question, this is huge news for the New Orleans Saints. We'll continue to cover it here all throughout the week. So that makes one of my predictions correct, for sure. And obviously it was an easy one, right? You know the starting 5 for the New Orleans Saints going into 2021. Again, let's list them off from left to right. You got Terron Armstead, almost messed up right away. Terron Armstead, you've got Andrus Peat, Erik McCoy at center, Cesar Ruiz at right guard. He's learning the guard position. That's where he's going to be. And then right tackle with Ryan Ramczyk. Now, New Orleans Saints usually keep about 8 or 9 offensive linemen on the roster all throughout the season, and so, or the active roster, the 53. So who are those other 3 or 4 names that could end up on the team? So let's take a look at snap counts from last year. Erik McCoy led the way with 1,000. Ryan Ramczyk was right there at 972. Terron Armstead on the outside, 798. Remember, he missed some games because of COVID and things like that. 714 for Andrus Peat. He missed some time as well with injury. And then Cesar Ruiz had 692. So that's your range between 692 to 1,000 for your starting 5. But remember, early on in the season, Cesar Ruiz was sort of shifting and swapping places with Nick Easton pretty often. Nick Easton ended up playing 525 snaps. Then after that, you've got James Hurst at 357. Then you've got Will Clapp, Ethan Greenidge, Derek Kelly, and Cameron Tom, all with under 55 or right at 55 snaps in Will Clapp's case. This is per these numbers, by the way. Big shout out, big thank you to PFN, Pro Football Network at PFN 365. Shout out to my guy, Cody Roark, host of Locked On Broncos, also a big part of PFN as well. But according to PFN, these numbers mean that the New Orleans Saints are returning 89.8% of their 2021 snaps of their 2020 snaps in 2021. So they're losing only 10.2% of their snaps that were taken last season. So where do those 10.2 snaps go? We're talking about a total of 528 snaps, which sounds like a lot, but in theory is not. Remember, the Saints often spend their time with 6 offensive linemen. They'll utilize that, especially if Taysom Hill is the quarterback. You'll see that a bunch for that team. And when Taysom Hill is the quarterback, right? Because even if Jameis Winston wins, I'm sure you'll see Taysom Hill under center on third downs in some cases, in the red zone in some cases. Like, they'll still utilize Taysom Hill the way that they utilize him with Drew Brees. So I think that it's important to keep that frame of reference and understand that sometimes they play 6 offensive line. But also remember that James Hurst missed the first 4 games of the season because of a previous suspension. So a lot of the snaps that you see Nick Easton getting, or that he got last year, came not only because he was filling in for Cesar Ruiz at an earlier point in the season while Cesar Ruiz was still learning the position, but because James Hurst was unavailable. So those 525 snaps can easily be split between 4 more games for James Hurst, as well as more snaps and a more steady process for Cesar Ruiz, more steady presence for Cesar Ruiz, who could easily take his 692 snaps from last year and bump that up to 700, 800, maybe even 900 snaps if he can stay healthy throughout the season at the right guard position. So I'm not worried about what the Saints lost as much as maybe some others will, because if you talk about this roster, which I can see the Saints keeping many of the players that are on this list, you know, your starting 5, James Hurst is an absolute lock for me. He's your 6th offensive lineman. And then maybe a guy like Will Clapp or maybe Calvin Throckmorton steps into Will Clapp's position. They're both very similar players, but maybe you get a little bit more versatility with Calvin Throckmorton. Then after that, Kyle Murphy maybe sounds like the next guy if they keep a 9th person, or if it comes down between Will Clapp and another. You're talking about a young guy that has been, has started all along the offensive line, both inside and out. That would be extremely cheap, that has dealt with injuries in the past, but you don't need him to be somebody that's getting even over 100 snaps. You need him getting, at most, if you replace Will Clapp and Ethan Greenidge's snaps together, you're looking at 96 snaps. Like, that's the most that you're looking for in terms of what you're trying to get here, is just depth, people that you can rely upon. So for me, you've got your 5 starters, you've got James Hurst. Then I could see the Saints pretty easily keeping Will Clapp and Ethan Greenidge and being perfectly fine with maybe holding on to a guy like Kyle Murphy if they keep a 9th offensive lineman. It's really simple for me. This New Orleans Saints offensive line is one of the strongest units, if not, actually, let me rephrase it. The New Orleans Saints offensive line is their strongest unit on their team, and it will continue to be in 2021, especially with the leadership of a guy like Ryan Ramczyk, who the Saints just locked up until 2000 and through 2026. We'll be talking about that more, as well as getting you all caught up on everything you need to know around the New Orleans Saints here throughout the rest of the week. Thank you for joining me on another episode. We'll be back with you tomorrow. Now that you're done here, go and check out Locked On Today. I did an appearance on there. What's going to be different about the New Orleans Saints in 2021? Talked all about it with Peter Bukowski. So check out the Locked On Today podcast wherever you get your podcast. Get all the sports news you need in less than 20 minutes. Make sure you're back here tomorrow right away, because we're going to be talking more about Ryan Ramczyk and what this means for the New Orleans Saints moving forward. And of course, keeping you up to date with everything else you need to know around your New Orleans Saints. As always, I appreciate y'all very much for everything that you do and all the support you show the channel, as well as the support you show the podcast. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Rawshaxton, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how your mom and them. Trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.